Hello, my name is Selene Harrington, and I want to share a story that changed my life forever. On the morning of my wedding, while I stood in uniform ready to marry the man I loved, my phone buzzed with a message from my father. "You're a shame." He didn't show up. He didn't walk me down the aisle. He erased me with a single sentence. But what came next was something I never expected. 58 missed calls, desperation flooding from the very man who had abandoned me. This is not just my story. It's about respect, dignity, and justice. "You're a shame." The words hit my phone just as the organist struck the first chord. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misread. The message burned against the dim vestibule light, bouquet stems slick under my grip. Beyond the doors, guests rose in a hush of fabric. The aisle lay bright and expectant. The silence should have felt holy. Instead, my pulse drummed like boots on metal. My father's judgment, 10 pale characters, fell with the finality of a gavel I'd heard all my life. It wasn't the first verdict without trial. At my captain's pinning no call. At the Bronze Star silence. When the silver oak leaves of Lieutenant Colonel were set on my shoulders, a cousin relayed his comment. "Not a real career." Each milestone filed as evidence against me. I read the line again. Still the same. Stained glass light washed the tiles. The bouquet bit my palm until pain steadied me. I wasn't surprised. I was simply tired how easily a day meant for vows could be turned into a fresh ruling. Ethan noticed, of course he did. In the antique mirror, his tie was already perfect. He turned anyway, reading my face like a map. He came close, his hand closed over mine, the phone pressed between our palms. In a voice pitched for me alone, he said, "Don't give him another inch of today." The line cut a path through the fog. I wanted to answer with something brave. All I managed was a breath that didn't shake. He nodded as if we'd agreed and stepped back so I could choose the field. I looked down at what I'd chosen instead of lace army dress blues creases, sharp brass catching the light. Ribbons aligned the silver leaves bright enough to argue for themselves. This wasn't costume or protest. It was a record you could wear pre-dawn formations, convoy briefs, nights counting names. I had earned every thread. I squared my shoulders. The doors loomed wood-glossed by years of hands. The sexton glanced over. I set the bouquet straight, let my hand find the cool metal bar, and felt the hinge of decision give beneath my palm. The sanctuary opened like a held breath. Conversation fell away. Heads turned, a ripple of surprise stilled. They had expected ivory and veil. Instead, a soldier measured steps, steady gaze, a march's cadence folded into ceremony. I moved down the aisle, aware of the organ's swell. A throat cleared, the soft click of a camera, aware too of how light the uniform felt, now that I carried myself, rather than his disappointment. Ethan waited at the altar, jaw set, eyes bright with wordless pride. For an instant I saw us as strangers, might a woman choosing her lived life over the picture someone else wrote, and the man who stood with her. The sting of my father's absence didn't vanish, but it receded to the cheap seats where it belonged. The officiant opened his book. I stood straighter, lifted my chin, and let the quiet strengthen rather than shame me. Whatever came after this moment was mine, signed not in ink, but in bearing. My phone buzzes again in my palm, first of many missed calls. At the long mahogany dining table years earlier, my father once declared, "A daughter who rejects law, rejects the Harrington estate." The sentence cleaved the room long before the cruel text at my wedding, but this was where it first took shape. Christmas 2002, the Harrington estate gleaming like a museum. Firelight ran over silver and crystal. Garlands perfumed the air. Snow pressed its face to the windows. Beneath it, etiquette sharpened. I was 18, my enlistment papers folded like contraband in a borrowed dress. Reginald Harrington presided at the head as if the chair were a bench. His gaze drifted down the table, assigning guilt. "This family was built on law," he said, carving the roast as if rendering sentence. "To abandon it is to abandon us." The clink of forks died. My cousins studied their plates. An uncle cleared his throat, then thought better of it. Mother's hand steady and nutmeg-scented poured wine as if nothing had shifted. "I want to serve my country," I said. The words surprised me by holding. His mouth tilted amusement, pretending to be mercy. "Soldiering is for people who cannot think. You were raised to argue precedent, not polish boots." A brittle laugh cracked from the far end. Heat climbed my neck, but it wasn't shame. It was certainty I would go truly anyway. Under the table, Mother's fingers found mine, a quick squeeze that steadied more than wine ever could. Her whisper threaded the silence. "Respect isn't inherited, Celine. You'll have to earn it yourself." She did not look at Father when she said it. That was her rebellion, gentle, precise, impossible to refute. I pushed back my chair. The scrape echoed against marble and molding. No one stopped me. In the hallway, portraits of Harringtons watched like a jury. I walked past their oil-dark eyes and took the stairs two at a time. In my room, a duffel waited under the bed, already packed, with what I could carry: Boots' notebook, the photo Mother loved of us laughing in the garden. At dawn, I would take a bus to the recruiter. The estate could keep its silence. I would learn a different language, orders, oaths, names called and accounted for. On the way back down, I paused by Father's study. The door was ajar. The green shaded lamp haloed his shoulders. He bent over parchment pen skating. I heard the soft rip of a blotter sheet, and after it, my name spoken only to the page. He drew a line through it as if striking a clause. A draft will swift deliberate, exile notarized in advance. He didn't look up. He never had to. I returned to the dining room long enough to kiss Mother's temple. She did not ask me to stay. "Send a postcard from Basic," she murmured, smiling, a steel-bright smile. Outside, snow had thickened to a steady veil. The estate glowed behind me like a ship I chose not to board. Years blurred those steps, replaced by desert heat, convoy dust, and the litany of names I counted until all were safe. Yet sometimes, amid radios hissing and maps spread thin as skin, I felt the old chill the moment a lineage tried to close over me like a lid. That night forged a private oath: I would not let the Harringtons define my terms. Now in a chapel, decades later, the memory receded the way fire amber fades to ash. The organ swelled. Light pooled on stained glass. My bouquet stems cut cool crescents into my palm. I breathed, squared my shoulders, and tasted iron and lilies, past and present, braided tight as ribbon. Back to present, my wedding phone screen shows his name flashing again. In the bridal suite, I opened a travel case and slid out a small fireproof lockbox. The air still carried the echo of vows and applause from the reception hall below, yet here, silence wrapped around me like armor. Mother's words about respect surfaced as I laid my palm on the steel lid. "Respect isn't inherited, Celine. You'll have to earn it yourself." She had whispered it years earlier, and tonight, the sentence felt less like comfort and more like command. The latch clicked. The smell of scorched paper rose faintly, even though the contents were sealed. Ethan leaned on the doorframe, bow tie loosened, his gaze steady. He didn't ask what I was doing. He only watched as I set the case on the vanity. I slid the key into the lock, twisting slowly as if diffusing something volatile. When the lid opened, my chest tightened. Inside lay folders worn by travel ribbons, frayed by sand, pages stamped once with the mark of secrecy and later released. Reports from Kandahar convoy, manifests, after-action reviews I had carried across continents. Each line was a ledger of nights I didn't know if I would see morning. At the top of the stack rested a letter on thick stationery edges, creased from being unfolded again and again, General Cassandra Drake's handwriting, concise and blunt. She had written that I had led with clarity under fire, preserving lives that might have been lost. My fingers traced the ink, the grooves pressed by her pen. The army had given me citations, yes, but this letter was different. It was testimony, living proof against every dismissal my father had ever uttered. He had called my service rebellion. He had erased me from inheritance. But here in black and white, a general affirmed what he refused to see. Ethan stepped closer, shadows softening his face. For a moment, his reflection joined mine in the mirror above the vanity. He glanced at the documents but spoke no word. Silence was his respect. I closed the lid halfway, then stopped. Memory unspooled, headlights blinking in the dust of a night convoy, radios hissing, voices fracturing through static. I was crouched over a map, recalculating coordinates as mortars fell too close. Men waited on my word, their eyes asking if I could lead them out. I had, and every page in this box bore witness. The weight of it pressed against my pulse, both anchor and blade. I shut the lid with care, turned the key, and slid the lockbox back into its case. If he tries to bury me again, I whispered to my own reflection, I'll bury him with the truth. The words rang louder than the band playing below, louder than the chatter of guests clinking glasses. Ethan's hand brushed my shoulder before he left me to the silence. Alone, I held the case against me like a shield. Then my phone buzzed on the vanity lit with Reginald's name. It rang again and again, 10 times in relentless sequence, as though he believed sheer persistence could undo years of disdain. The glow pulsed over the steel box. Past and present collided in that rhythm, every call, a gavel strike, every vibration, a reminder the confrontation was no longer a possibility. It was coming, and I was ready. The buzz filled the room, each ring fading. I stared until the screen dimmed reflection over his name, and in that overlap, I saw silence versus my record, legacy versus my truth. The first headline hit before the wedding cake was cut. Harrington heiress turned soldier. A family disgrace. It lit the tables like a flare. The band played soft. Glasses chimed. Guests tilted their phones so the blue light hid inside their palms. A single question mark worked like a verdict waiting to be shared. Reginald had once boasted, the press will always side with me. He'd meant the society pages, and the editors he'd charmed overscotched the ones who still called him judge. Seeing that headline, I could hear him at my shoulder. Miles Cartwright reached us first, tie loosened, breath short. He angled his screen away from the room. Seated by the same Shell LLC as his fundraiser, he said, they pulled your Bronze Star photo and framed it as performance. Ethan's jaw set. We can sue. I touched his sleeve. Let him fire first. The words steadied both of us. If he wanted a public trial, he'd meet the record. Whispers collected like lint. Uniform at a wedding. Her father must be livid. Waste of a name. I lifted my chin and breathed with the music. Respect yourself when others won't, Mother had said. Miles scrolled, pseudo-questions doing accusations work. Is service a cry for attention? Has discipline masked a troubled youth? Anonymous retired jurist, praising tradition, the cadence is pure Reginald. Cross-examining me since childhood, Ethan muttered. Cross-examination requires facts, I said. The cake knife flashed. A phone shutter clicked. A cousin offered a compliment that avoided my attire. Another guest flushed with champagne called service a hobby. I thanked them with the cool for hostel rooms. On a nearby table, screens refreshed. The headline cloned itself. Then the image, my portrait in dress, blues, medals, cropped to look like decoration instead of record. The caption in block font read, shame. It floated over the dance floor like a fog set to contempt. Tell me to pull the plug, Ethan said. We'll bury it before dessert. No. If we chase it, we feed it. Let it burn out against something real. I felt the locked file waiting upstairs. We answer with documents, not decibels. Miles nodded. Give me an hour. I'll push a counterpiece, factual, restrained, tied to Cassandra Drake's letter. Make sure the headline honors service, I said. I don't belong to him. I belong to the work. We danced because ceremony still matters. Ethan's hand found the small of my back. Our first turn snagged on the static of 100 devices. By the second, the room shrank to count and hold. A cluster near the bar tried for photos. I looked into the lens and smiled the way I did for troops stepping off. We are fine. Save fear. Miles returned with an editor on speaker. Sources named. Pull quotes. No adjectives we can't defend, he said, already drafting. Let them sneer at dignity. Applause rose at the end of the song, warmer than before. For a moment, we were a normal couple at a normal wedding. No exhibits submitted, no defense required. But the internet doesn't RSVP. A push alert bloomed. The outlet updated with the cropped shot. Comments followed: attention-seeking family disgrace, who does she think she is? Old accusations in new dress. I felt them land and pass through. Armor learns its seams. Ready? Ethan asked. Ready? I said, meaning more than dancing. The band swelled. Crystal chimed. I held my posture like a salute, unblinking. He checked my phone. 25 missed calls from Reginald within an hour. The next morning at a cafe, my phone displayed 58 missed calls from father. Frosted panes diffused the light. The espresso machine hissed like distant surf. Ethan watched the street. He'll claw harder when control slips, he said, tapping a calm rhythm. I opened voicemail. The first message carried his courtroom tone. Call me back immediately. The next, sharper. You embarrass my name. A third. You will regret this uniform fixation. Then bargaining. Come alone. We can discuss terms. Do not involve that architect. You are not listening. Rage thinned into breath. I saw the article. This is not what you think. Your mother would have understood me. We can be civilized. The 10th was only silence and a click. Ignore him, Ethan said. Silence is a wall he can't scale. I won't let him turn pursuit into policy, I answered. I texted an address. Come now. We waited. A truck sighed to a stop. A child drew a heart in the fogged glass and wiped it away. I counted breaths, the way I counted names on the line 4 in hold, 4 out, until the bell over the door chimed. Reginald arrived ironed and certain of verdict, dressed as a man. He took the chair without asking, laid his gloves like evidence, folded his hands. You have caused something unfortunate. You will post a clarification, hold a second ceremony in appropriate dress, explain my absence as health, and I will speak to the paper about tone. Ethan's breath primed to argue. I touched his sleeve. You left orders, I said. Not messages. Language and appearances matter, he replied. I built a name you are dragging. End it now. The estate remains available if you stop this spectacle. The estate isn't the point, I said. Respect is. Respect is conferred, he said, by institutions, by fathers. Or earned, I answered. By service, by showing up. The barista turned up steam to drown the room. Reginald softened his voice. You misread me. I wanted excellence, not dirty work. Let me repair what can be repaired. Repair has been your code for concealment, I said. I slid my phone forward, the missed calls list a dark meter. You skipped a wedding. You will not skip my life. He flinched, then rebuilt his posture. The internet loves no one for long. I offer permanence, the kind that keeps disasters off the record. My record is my work, I said. It stands without you. He tried a different flank. Cartwright baits you for clicks. That general wrote too many letters. Your husband will tire of this crusade. The law's patient. Fathers are permanent. The words reached for the old teenager in me. The uniform under my coat answered first. We won't do this in the dark, I said. If you speak to me, it's where light can find the words. He looked at the door, calculated exits returned. You would make a spectacle. You already did. You just preferred to narrate both sides. Snow feathered the glass. A timer beeped. He stood to adjust his coat, sat again, ordered coffee he didn't drink. Say you regret the uniform, he said. I don't. Yale. A degree. No. Drop the foundation. I intend to build it. I said so exposure is the point. He swallowed. The old rhythm plead bargain punish found no purchase. I set my palms on the cup and let the steam rewrite the air between us. Ethan's finger tapped once more. I nodded almost imperceptibly. Reginald's gaze locked on mine. The cafe hummed china, touching china spoons circling foam, a hinge murmuring as people flowed in and out, indifferent alive. His silence is loaded, his eyes calculating, plotting his next move. Gideon Price laid a manila envelope on the table between us. Your father has amended the will. You are no longer heir to the Harrington estate. His paneled office in December smelled of lemon oil and victories. Heavy curtains dulled daylight. Diplomas lined the wall. And over Gideon's shoulder a portrait of Reginald seemed to preside. The words from years ago hissed up like steam. A daughter who rejects law rejects the Harrington estate. Your father executed a codicil, Gideon said. The trust shifts to a foundation with him as lifetime trustee. Real property moves to a holding company. You are replaced by alternates defined as meritorious. He slid the envelope toward me with a pen laid across the flap like a gavel. Ethan leaned forward. Meritorious to whom this is theft with Latin. Please read, Gideon replied. Anger is a poor red line. I opened the envelope. Paper rasped. I read like I read coordinates, slow, exact, no room for wishing. Revocation language, substituted beneficiaries, poison pill no contest clause, and the signature date 3 days before my wedding. I saw him sign with the same hand that had typed, "You're a shame." Ethan whispered a curse. He did it while you were fitting the uniform. Finalized, Gideon said, tapping 2 initials. Here and here. Why call us at all? Ethan asked. Admire the workmanship, notice to interested parties, Gideon said. And a warning, he will not stop on paper. I kept reading until the clauses lost their perfume. The foundation's bylaws let him appoint successors. The holding company could lease back assets to the estate at his discretion. Even Mother's jewelry was recast as historical property. The erasure wasn't an impulse. It was policy. On what finding? I asked. Maintenance of legacy. Meaning control, Ethan said. Meaning discretion, Gideon answered, lowering his voice. He intends to frame this as stewardship. If you challenge publicly, he will answer with narrative. I prefer records, I said. Exactly. I looked at the portrait and felt the old dinner table in my bones. Then I took the pen. I slid the envelope back, signing contested in the margin. Gideon inhaled. You plan to litigate? And to document, I said. Dates, emails, trustees, bylaws. We won't do it in the dark. Ethan's hand found my shoulder, quiet agreement. Expect filings before New Year's, Gideon said. Expect stories. He glanced at the portrait. He believes the press still belongs to him. Let him fire first, Ethan said. We'll answer with proof. I tucked the copy into my bag. In the corridor, the carpet swallowed our steps. Outside, the air had the hard edge of winter. We rode down in a mirrored elevator where my uniform looked like a verdict I could live with. On the sidewalk, cabs hissed, and the city moved without caring who had amended what. At home, I labeled a folder, Will Codicil Deck 2023. Inside it, I placed the copy, a receipt Gideon had insisted I sign, and a fresh note to myself, timeline of execution. Board minutes, foundation filings, holding company registry, Cassandra's letter, convoy reports. Truth is a mosaic. Tile enough and it becomes a floor no one can pretend isn't there. I set the folder beside the lockbox and breathed until the day slowed. The buzzer rasped once and gave up. I poured water, washed the glass, listened to the apartment click back into quiet. Snow began to salt the sill. I almost believed the war would wait until morning. That night, a plain envelope arrives at my door. Inside, altered military records designed to smear me. The blog headline blared across my laptop. Celine Harrington hero or hoax midnight split the apartment, the blue square of my screen and the dark everywhere else. Ethan paced our rug in socked feet, counting corners. The post refreshed, parading new documents that tried to rebrand my deployments as desk duty and my citations as clerical mistakes footers, wrong codes off signatures, oddly crisp where they should have bled. Miles appeared by video, eyes ringed, newsroom bright behind him. "We traced the upload," he said. "Metadata points to Gideon's office, not his account and intern's credentials. Same intranet path." Ethan stopped. "We sue. Injunction today." "Not yet," I said. "We fight with truth, not anger. If we led with fury, Reginald would sell the story he's practiced for years: hysterical daughter, patient father, legacy under attack." Miles nodded. "Then we counter with primary sources. What stands alone?" I knelt to the cabinet. The fireproof box slid out with the scrape of a verdict. I unlocked it. The lid breathed paper and sand. On top lay the letter I'd carried across postings: General Cassandra Drake, Inc., over our unit crest. The words were exact. I had led under fire, recalculated extraction coordinates, when comms failed, preserved lives with clear command. Ethan read with me, anger cooling to precision. "They forged you small," he said. "Let's print you to scale." I set the letter under the lamp, angled the camera so Miles could see the emboss, the pen grooves, the tiny nicks along the edge from many folds. "Original in my possession since 2015, I said. "Scanned once for a commendation package. Never public." Miles's fingers flew. "I'll pair it with 2 confirmations, logistics and medevac, and a note on the forgery. Wrong form, revision year. Wrong footer, wrong field codes. Whoever did it didn't speak Army. Or spoke it poorly on purpose." Ethan muttered. I drew more records, the after-action review with my initials, a roster, with my call sign, a pre-dawn photo where the air still looked gray with dust, and a sergeant was smiling because we were intact. I did not want to live there again. I wanted that night to work for me now. "The blog's accelerating," Miles said. "People love a takedown more than truth. We need weight." "Make the piece spare," I said. "No adjectives you can't defend in court." Quote, Cassandra verbatim. Embed the scans at full resolution. Add hash values. Link the form revision guide that proves the fake. Ethan's hand rested on my chair. "Name the source." "I can name the network path," Miles said without naming the intern. "Do that," I said. "Leave the kid a way back. Put the light on the order giver." He met my eyes, then nodded. "Understood." I fed the letter into the scanner. The light bar crawled like a fuse. I checked the file, saved to a clean drive, and the cloud attached the roster, AAR photo, and an affidavit: chain of custody, provenance inspection, welcome. Miles's cursor blinked like held breath. He hesitated. "Your call." I looked once more at that headline, hero or hoax, and felt the old convoy night settle, not as a wound, but as a floor I could stand on. Publish it. Tonight. I clicked send. The room exhaled. Ethan stopped pacing. Miles leaned forward, listening for the first pings. The cursor blinked. The city held its breath. Outside, snow whispered. Inside, the scanner's fan wound down like a stubborn watch. As I hit send, my phone lights up, Reginald calling again. This time, I let it ring. Miles's headline cut through the noise. From shame to shield. Lilton Cola. Harrington's record speaks. January began fast and bright, phones trilling, editors arguing, in shorthand, screens blooming with updates. Ethan and I slipped past a cluster of young reporters buzzing on adrenaline and bad coffee, and there was Miles at the hub sleeves, rolled voice tempered to steady the storm he'd summoned. "We went with the quiet headline that cuts," he said, pointing to the site's front page. Cassandra Drake's letter anchored the piece. Scans open clean. Chain of custody sat in a neat sidebar. Every adjective had been audited out of existence. Facts had room to stand upright. The story traveled. A retired general retweeted it with the tag, Jar Honor Not Shame, and a line that felt like a salute service measured in lives saved. A former squadmate listed names we had walked out together. A medevac nurse wrote 3 sentences that left dust in my throat. Doubt still sparked some collect sparks for sport, but the fire moved on. Momentum shifted audibly. Ethan read over my shoulder, exhaling through a thin grin. Let him shoot first, he murmured, echoing himself. Then we show the world what bullets look like. The line felt like a bridge finally crossed. In the comments, a few avatars kept flinging mud shaped like questions. Others answered with links, timestamps, revision guides. Moderators pinned documents, not arguments. An old photo of me pinning a ribbon on a private with shaking hands floated upward, captioned by a stranger, not shame. Standard. I felt the room tilt toward fairness, not fully but perceptibly, as if a jury had started taking notes. Miles guided me to a corner studio the size of a closet. A ring light hummed soft. A producer counted down, then pointed go. The interviewer asked why the uniform at a wedding, whether fathers own daughters, what I'd say to women who trade one gatekeeper for another. I kept the answers small, factual, ready to be quoted without wincing. When she asked what I believed about respect, the room seemed to steady on its axis. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. The sentence wasn't a clapback. It felt like a floor I could finally put both feet on. The producer mouthed, "Nice, cut the feed," and the studio noise returned air invents a screw rattling in the light stand. Outside, the newsroom had shifted key. Phones still rang, but laughter threaded through the static. A junior reporter read me a DM from a military spouse thanking us for writing a headline I can show my daughter. Another brought over a stack of printouts highlighting typos in the forgeries, grinning like a student who found the teacher's trick. Miles kept saying steady, steady like a medic beside a stretcher kept upright by hands. Then came the countercurrent. A push alert blinked. Another outlet framed our piece as spin. A talk radio account called me a ladder climber in boots. I let the words slide past like rain on glass. Weather passes. Records remain. Ethan squeezed my shoulder once and I felt the squeeze like a punctuation mark that ended a nervous paragraph. Miles checked the graph, a climb, then a plateau, then another climb, as Thatcher honor, not shame, trended. An editor clapped once at a quiet desk, the small sound of a tide turning. Miles's phone buzzed twice, then a third time. He glanced, went pale, and motioned me into the glassed-in conference room. On the table lay a freshly printed PDF header thick with legal letterhead. Miles whispers that Reginald has filed a defamation suit against me. If you've been drawn in by how truth is turning the tide, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this fight. My inbox pinged Defense Women's Leadership Summit, keynote invitation. The seal watermark ghosted the pixels of my temporary DC office. Ethan paced near the window, tracing frost-counting turns, calm. Invitation, keynote, national audience. Each word swung my private fight into the Republic's hallway. In my head, Cassandra Drake's voice rasped from years back. One day you'll stand in front of the nation, then encouragement, tonight instruction. The phone vibrated. I hear you've been invited, she said, without preface. Paper rustled, staff murmured. I told them you'd say yes. General I said, it feels like stepping onto a new range with the lights up. Truth carries farther than gunfire, Drake replied. The nation needs you. This is your battlefield now. Same rules, know your objective. Move with discipline. Bring everyone you can home. A pause softened her tone. And if he throws legal smoke, hold your line. Wind clears. I pressed the phone harder. He'll come harder. He will. Let him strain. Pressure shows cracks. When I hung up, Ethan had stopped pacing. He'll flood courts, press donors, old colleagues. Then let him. I said, a valve opening. I opened a blank file. Title, The Second Oath. The cursor blinked. The name steadied me. I wrote like planning an operation: define ground, define stakes. Define what we won't surrender. Not revenge, not lineage, service. A second oath: show up for truth when uniforms are hung and mics live. I sketched the arc: respect is earned. Institutions must match their seals. Daughters aren't footnotes. I wove the convoy night into accountability, the lockbox into chain of custody, the wedding into refusing shame. Ping. Miles Summit PR wants a quote. I typed what I meant to carry into the room. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned by people, by systems, by nations. Another Ping counsel forwarded a fresh filing from Reginald Heavy with injunctions and reputational harm. Ethan read jaw tight and set it face down like a card he wouldn't play. He's counting on fatigue, he said. I've been tired under worse skies, I answered. Shrinking is a choice. The title held. Okay, the second oath. Drake again, shorter. Media will bait spectacle. Answer with structure. Keep it spare. Let the record speak. Copy, I said. And thank you. Make them proud, they asked. Make him sorry he didn't. Click. I stood and faced the window. The dome caught the low sun like endurance. I pictured rows of uniform-suit students, pens poised, skepticism meeting curiosity's edge. Fear arrived tidy and small. Duty set a chair for it and kept typing. Ethan joined me. Whatever he files, we answer on our timing. We've answered him my whole life, I said. Now we answer for something larger. I printed the outline, slid it into a blue folder: Summit Keynote Second Oath. Night gathered early. I packed, switched off the lamp, and heard the office return to its hum. The city moved with purpose. I texted Drake, accepted. Title locked. I added it to the calendar and under my ribs where resolve keeps warm. Ethan hailed a cab. My inbox chimed. Congratulations, logistics, a simple. You've earned this, from a name I hadn't seen since basic. I let the messages land. Somewhere across town a grate hissed and settled. A hand hovered over glass. A plan too long deferred twitched awake. Across town, Reginald smashes a glass as Gideon assures him, we'll bury her before March. I wrote the first line in bold across the page. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned. The lamp at the National Defense Library poured a cone of light over my notebook, leaving the stacks in dusk that smelled of cloth and glue. Pages whispered. Ethan sat a table away, present like a lighthouse constant. I wrote the second line, smaller, testing cadence like a field radio: speak, wait, confirm. A nation's honors mean what its institutions practice. Service is not a costume. Silence is not consent. I crossed out 2, underlined 1, then listened. Even the air had rank. My mother's voice moved through memory. Respect yourself when others won't. Christmas silver frost on glass, her hand under the table, as father's decree landed like a gavel. Respect isn't inherited, you earn it. I set her line beside mine, breadcrumb to breadcrumb. I sketched the opening: the convoy halt when comms died, and the night seemed to hold its breath. How 10 quiet decisions add up to one life. Training trimmed fear into skill. Paperwork could bury a soldier deeper than sand. The first funeral in dress blues taught me ceremony is armor you hold for a family. Ethan brought 2 cups, waited for my paragraph to land. This isn't just for you, he said at last, voice level with the lamp's hum. It's for every soldier overlooked in a quiet room, a place to stand and be seen. I wrote a section called Ground Truth. Another structures. In the margin, I listed what belonged to each: the lockbox, the AAR, a medevac note folded like a wing. Then the bylaws, the codicil, the poison pill clause. I didn't need to brand him. I could show a system and ask who benefits when respect becomes inheritance. The answer would follow. I paused to inventory the quiet pen tapping a soft clock, the vent's breath. I thought of the headline that called me shame of the forged file of the counterpiece that cut without adjectives. Tonight I would draft the bridge from my mother's kitchen to a podium, from a file to a nation's promise. Ethan's hand touched my shoulder, then lifted away. Include the wedding, he said, almost apologizing. It matters that you refuse to hide the work you earned. I wrote it plain. I wore the uniform because I worked for it and because work is witness. I mapped the middle left into policy, right into accountability, straight through the intersection where daughters stop letting fathers draw the road. Mercy that doesn't erase truth. Truth that doesn't need cruelty to be heard. Oath, the first and the second one to the flag, and one to speak when I'd rather go quiet. I circled verbs with weight: serve, witness, repair, reckon. I cut words that liked their own reflection. I penciled pauses a speaker could live in. The page felt like a formation no one left behind. When the lamp hummed a warning, I uncapped and read. The spine was there. The ribs held. Only the name remained to fix where anyone could see. I scrawled the title, The Second Oath. Yes. Paper steadied in stacks. Clips nested like small steel commas. I slid pages into a folder, then into a leather case worn smooth by years of briefings. The library's silence stepped closer. In the window's reflection, aisles made a dim cathedral. My uniform darkened and brightened with breath. I checked the time late. The hall beyond the reading room ran like a runway, lights, low carpet swallowing sound. I pressed the folder to my ribs and felt the draft thrum there, a second pulse ready. As I pack the papers, I glimpse a figure in the hallway. Reginald has arrived in D.C. I walked onto the stage, the weight of my dress blues heavier than any medal I'd ever worn. Spotlights found the brass on my shoulders and turned it into small suns. Beyond them, the Women in Defense Leadership Summit was a living sea: uniforms and suits, rows of sharp faces, cameras on rails. I set my notes on the lectern and let the house noise fall into one waiting breath. My father didn't come to my wedding, I began. He sent a sentence. A quiet ripple moved through the hall. He called my uniform a disgrace. He asked me to hide the work that shaped me. The screen showed a date, a text: chapel doors, opening the bouquet I never carried because my hands needed to swing free. I nodded to the technicians. The second slide appeared, a redacted map, a timestamp, the grain of a dangerous night. Here is where we ran out of comms and not out of nerve, I said. Here is where logistics held and people lived. I lifted the folder from my lockbox. The documents breathed that old paper: weather after action review, convoy rosters, medevac confirmations, and then the letter whose ink groove I knew: General Cassandra Drake's testimony. She wrote this, I said, reading the line that mattered. Lieutenant Colonel Harrington executed under fire with clarity that preserved 14 lives. I looked up. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned. The phrase steadied me, then walked into the room and found who needed it. It found me again. Applause began like roof-edge rain. I kept going. Family is not who shares your name, it's who shows up. A woman pressed her lips. A young lieutenant straightened. The feed delay carried my words to monitors, then back, as headlines tasting for meaning. I told the story like a field report: what we saw, what we chose, what it cost, where we stand now. I did not say his name. I showed a system. I set my file beside the forged one and let the form numbers and wrong footers convict the lie. I explained how stewardship becomes control when scrutiny is a guest, not a rule, how legacy without service curdles to vanity. I kept my voice spare enough to carry in sun and storm. Then I spoke about the wedding day and uniform: why I wore it, why I refused regret, why ceremony can be armor when eyes hunt shame. The screen showed us still the aisle, the stained glass, Ethan's hand on mine. Someone in the balcony cheered. Laughter followed, then a hush. I felt Drake's presence before I saw her, an old field wind crossing an indoor space. She walked to the foot of the stage as I closed the folder. I ended where the speech had begun to write itself weeks ago in a library's dim. We will keep our second oath to tell the truth when it is inconvenient and to show up when we are tired. Silence held for half a beat, then cracked wide. People rose first in clusters, then as one body, hands up palms, red faces wet or laughing or stunned into stillness. The sound arrived like a wave breaking clean over a reef. I stood in it and did not shrink. Drake climbed the steps with that battlefield economy I'd recognize in my sleep stopped beside me and raised her hand in a slow, deliberate salute. I returned it. The hall brightened as if someone nudged the sun. Ethan waited just off the wing eyes bright. Senior officials near the front had phones out expressions caught between calculation and relief. I felt fear look for a chair and find none there. The ovation ran long enough to become a promise. When it thinned to breath, I stepped back from the lectern and nodded toward the technicians, leaving the evidence on the screen for anyone to read again. The moderator's voice returned, but the room hadn't finished echoing. I gathered my notes. The house lights lifted. In the black beyond the first rows, the aisles met like quiet rivers. A figure in shadow separated from the back wall, familiar in posture in the tilt of an unrepentant chin. Indeed. From the back row, I spot Reginald leaving phone in hand, plotting his next move. Morning headlines screamed whistleblower Harrington's record inflated. The hotel TV pulsed red banners. My phone buzzed, hit the pen cup, and kept shivering as pundits rehearsed doubt. Miles burst through on video hair at half-mast voice mid-sentence. They're quoting a whistleblower. Not true. The upload path is the same as before Gideon's firm. He seeded a burner as an internal clerk. Logs showed a VPN hop, a timestamp kissing last night's gala, a metadata trail that spelled rehearsal more than revelation. Ethan lifted an eyebrow. Desperation has a smell. It has a signature, Miles said. Same wrong form revision, same footer, same field codes. They copy-pasted their own mistake. My hands went cold with the need to move. I opened the lockbox and laid the originals on the carpet like tiles across a river. Drake's letter waited, ink groove catching light, patient as ever. My phone lit with her name. I've seen the morning show, she said, voice like boot leather. We fight in sunlight, she added. Press room at 11. Bring your documents, I'll bring the rest. The rest witnesses. 2 from logistics. 1 from medevac. A jag who can explain the forms, she said. And me, Good Miles said. I'm sending the log chain to outlets that still check facts and to the court. I've moved for sanctions. Ethan leaned against the window, DC laid out like a board set. What does Gideon think? Echo outruns Bell. He needs one more day of fog, I said. One day where doubt outruns proof. I slid papers into plastic sleeves, each page a small shield. Let him have his day. We'll give the week to records. By 11, carpet became podium blue. The press room buzzed with tense politeness. Drake stepped to the microphone with a matching folder and a stare that could sign a ceasefire. I was there, she said. I signed it. This is truth. She read the line and set down the original for cameras. A reporter tried to reframe it as politics. Drake declined it. The JAG explained the form series. The medevac nurse spoke people bleeding coordinates called a bird landing where theory said it couldn't. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned, I said again, because repetition is evidence. I placed chain of custody on the table, hashes scans custody dates. The microphones clicked like teeth testing a new diet. Motion granted, the judge suspended discovery. By afternoon, the bar opened its own file. Gideon arrived at the wrong time for a man who liked corridors. He tried a statement, zeal, confusion, clerks, chaos, but the board had prints. Speeches went short. By 4, the board announced a suspension. Reginald's world measures power in letters after a name. The alphabet slid from his card in headlines. Judge retired. Chair formerly. Counsel suspended. Father conspicuously absent. Calls he used to return went to voicemail. Allies practiced amnesia. I didn't celebrate. I sat with Ethan, hands warming a paper cup I forgot to drink. You held Drake said, simply finding us in the hallway. Then she did the most generous thing, she left, so the victory felt like ours. Alleged earned more time than proved. Elsewhere, Gideon looked smaller. Nearby, a man I knew by blood practiced a new sentence and did not like it. I packed the lockbox. The documents returned to their places. The day was a gauntlet, and proof had hands. Ethan folded the uniform and kissed my temple with the relief of someone who had counted lifeboats and found one extra. Official seal. Sparse script. Inside, a letter leaned forward without gush. Colonel Harrington, it read. It is our honor to inform you that you have been shortlisted for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. A letter arrives from the White House. I am shortlisted for the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The President placed the Medal of Freedom around my neck. His words a quiet thunder. The country thanks you, Colonel. Chandeliers trembled with light. Cameras clicked like careful rain. The East Room held its breath, and then released it as steady applause rose. Metal touched cloth, the ribbon's weight settled. I kept my head steady, eyes forward. I stepped back one pace. The band eased into a polite chord. I caught Ethan's face over a shoulder, composed as General Drake nodded once. I shook hands, took the citation, and turned toward the rows. At the very back, the light thinned. A silhouette, rigid and singular, held a chair like a post. Reginald, smaller than the room spine, exact mouth, a dry line. He did not stand. He did not clap. Ethan reached me as the line curved, his whisper low and sure. He can't deny you now. His palm found mine for a second and let go. I gave the practiced answers. Gratitude, teamwork, those who rarely get the light. I mentioned the nurse who landed where theory said not, to the convoy that made it through the names. I never stop tracing when rooms grow quiet. When the program ended, staff directed us through a corridor bright with portraits. The carpet softened our steps. Portraits watched. I paused by a case of old letters. Then the air changed. He stepped out from the shadow of a doorway. No entourage, no gavel. Just the suit, the eyes. I inherited the posture of a man balanced on phrasing. He looked at the medal, then met my eyes. I was wrong, he said. The 3 words carried stored weight. I heard what he did not add: the uniform, the wedding, the night I left with a duffel. I also heard what he could not say yet. The hallway spoke first, vents hissing a clipped announcement, the hush after ceremony. Then I answered with a fact. The country thanked me today. I did not do this to prove you wrong. He swallowed as if cross-examination had deserted him. I know, he said. I didn't know how to meet the person you became. His gaze fell. No court taught me that. Courts teach rules, I said. Homes teach witness. I thought of my mother's hand closing around mine under a winter table. Respect yourself when others won't. Her voice threaded the space between us long enough that we might choose the next step without revenge. He nodded once. I won't ask forgiveness here, he said. Only your time later. Behind him, a staffer cleared the corridor. The day had more pages. I looked past Reginald to the door, to Ethan's outline and Drake's spare salute. I set the citation against my ribs and listened for the hinge in me already turned. Reporters called out questions that braided praise with bait. I let the facts walk, instead dates, units, custody, names spelled correctly. A cadet near the aisle lifted a phone, then lowered it as if the moment deserved eyes. I recognized that reverence. I once carried it like a small lantern. In the anteroom, a portrait watched with calm, someone who knew ceremonies cost. The band softened. The sound thinned under the door. Reginald's shoes were courtroom bright. Etiquette taught him patience. Pride taught him distance. I studied him as terrain cover lines of sight elevation. No jury here. No stenographer. Just 2 people and a record already made. We stood together, not touching, while chandeliers hummed above the formal silence after applause. He drew breath, and the corridor steadied around space we had made. The metal was anchor and answer. I hold his gaze, neither forgiving nor rejecting, leaving the air taut with unfinished business. The sign on the office door read, Second Oath Foundation, for veterans by veterans. Morning lit the glass. The stencil looked cut into light. Inside, folding tables made a corridor of clipboards and coffee. The air smelled printer warm and hopeful. A line had already bent around the reception desk, women in denim blazers and carefully retired uniforms. Miles stood by a banner fixing a crooked grommet with tape. Ethan moved through the hallway as if logistics were a language only he could hear, routers humming, tablets syncing, name tags aligning. He caught my eye and lifted 2 fingers. We were ready. I stepped onto a riser and spoke without a mic. Welcome. If you were told to be smaller, you are in the wrong building for that. Here we practice the second oath, showing up for truth and for each other. Hands loosened, shoulders settled. A ripple of breath moved through the room. Intake volunteers guided the first group toward mentors, resume triage, benefits, navigation, mock interviews, child care vouchers stapled to packets. A printer clattered out calendars. A board bloomed with cards from employers promising first looks. I kept moving, listening for jams, a form that confused, a laptop that refused, a name needing care. A young veteran at the end of the line, tucked hair behind her ear, gaze on the floor. When it was her turn, she whispered, "For the first time, I feel seen." The sentence landed like a folded flag. I did not reach for words. I wrote her name on a card and walked her to a mentor, a medic, who once counted heartbeats in storms and now counted options like doors. Miles waved me over to the press table. "Local first," he said. "Then national if we want." I gave them 20 minutes, enough to explain structure, not enough to turn launch into biography. "This is not a monument," I said. "It's a workshop." They scribbled. A camera light winked. Someone mouthed a headline. In the far room, Ethan stood over a floor plan marking where the clinic would go, where the peer circle would sit, where coffee could spare keyboards. He nodded toward me, but kept his hands on the map. He lets me lead by making sure the ground holds. By noon, the hall shifted from lines to clusters, from waiting to working. Small victories rose. Someone found the right form, someone scheduled counseling, someone laughed without bracing. I pinned my mother's photo above the copier. Respect yourself when others won't. The machine warmed the edges. The paper smelled like a new page. Afternoon brought media vans and a headline, "A legacy born of defiance." I resisted the urge to correct the word defiance. Accuracy can arrive in installments. The cameras saw mentors and mentees bent over laptops and calendars, coffee rings on manuals, a toddler asleep under a table while her mother practiced an answer twice, then smiled. We closed at 6 and it was still bright. Ethan stacked chairs. Miles boxed banners. I walked the rooms and let the silence return, full of what had been said. On the desk, a small stack of thank you notes had appeared, written on intake form backs with borrowed pens. A courier rolled in, asked for a signature, and left a single envelope on the counter, thick cream, unassuming. So, an envelope arrives, addressed in Reginald's neat handwriting. The first line stopped me cold. "Celine, I see you now." Cicadas sawed the evening steady. Porch boards held the day's heat. My glass left a wet ring in the dusk. Ethan sat across from me, shoeless, patient. I opened the envelope with a butter knife. "Ceremony matters when you choose it." "Celine," he wrote in a hand that once signed rulings. "I see you now." The loop of the S was careful, almost shy. He named no excuses, only change. He had stepped down from boards that liked to pronounce and not attend. He had donated to veterans' charities, some anonymously, some not. He had begun visiting the VA clinic on Thursdays to explain forms without making anyone smaller. "True leadership begins where pride ends," he wrote. I mistook my pride for guidance and called it love. It was control. "You taught me a different language." He did not write apology. He didn't need to. The ink carried its shape. I read the page twice, then again, letting its cadence pass through like wind. I thought of the cafe of the boundary I set respect first. Apology second. I thought of my mother's handwriting on grocery lists, the tidy loops that meant we would have what we needed. Her absence sat with us like light felt even when you don't look at it. Ethan reached for my free hand, then waited, because waiting is also respect. He didn't ask what it said. He asked if I wanted tea. Reginald wrote about the East Room without borrowing its light. He sat in the last row. He learned more there. He used witness correctly. I cannot recover the hours I should have shown up, he wrote. I can only show up in the hours that remain. If there is work and I'm permitted to do it, I will go. The line was straight without ceremony, like a man laying down the wrong tools and lifting the ones that fit. I folded the letter and set it down. No tears, only resolve. The cicadas tuned the dark. A porch light opened and stayed. Down the block, a dog argued with the night and lost politely. The world continued as it does, and I let it. Justice that arrives is not a drum to beat, but a floor to build on. What will you do? Ethan asked softly. I told him I'd invite Reginald to the second oath office on a quiet morning as mentors set up chairs and the printer spat calendars. He could carry boxes. He could listen. He would not advise. If he stayed, service would outweigh spectacle. He nodded and we let the porch hold us. The foundation's fall calendar was already fat with names. The young veteran, the one who whispered, "I feel seen," emailed. She'd passed her certification. I breathed that small, bright fact until it touched the evening. I picked up the letter and wrote the date in the corner. I signed my initials beside it, a habit from deployments that makes memory a ledger you can balance. Justice came late, I whispered to Ethan. But it came. He squeezed my hand once. We did not stand for a toast or call anyone. We watched the horizon finish its work and give the street back to lamps, insects, and quiet. The knife lay across the envelope like silver. I slid it back to the tray and smoothed the paper ceremony because endings deserve it as much as beginnings. I let the quiet stretch until it felt earned. Justice had not arrived with trumpets. It came like mail, daily and particular. On deployments, victory meant logistics done right, people home by dusk. On this porch, it meant a letter that chose respect over posture. Ethan watched me not as a problem to solve, but as a person choosing pace. We built that pace: briefings, breakfasts, headlines, laundry, long plans, and short kindnesses. I pictured Reginald at the VA desk, sleeves rolled, explaining a form without raising his voice, learning names he once ignored. That image did not absolve him. It located him in a future where repair outweighed pride and was worth the lift. Final shot. The envelope under fading light, last words visible. With respect, Dad. When I look back at every silence, every headline, and every courtroom shadow my father cast, I realize the weight wasn't just mine to carry. It belongs to anyone who has been told they are less than enough. I want you, as my audience, to step into that moment with me. Share your thoughts, your encouragement, your own stories. Leave me a comment as if you were speaking across this porch, reminding me that justice late is still justice real. Your words can turn this tale from mine alone into ours, woven with solidarity, strength, and recognition.